Welcome to the Eat This Book podcast. I'm Michael Whitworth. Each day we take a small piece of scripture and we sit with it. Not a quick snack that disappears before lunch, not a chore you check off of a list, but rather a meal meant to be savored. So pull up a chair. Let's eat. Lot was afraid to stay in Zoar. The little city he had negotiated for, the compromise escape route. He couldn't rest there. He had just watched fire fall from heaven. He had just lost his wife on the road. He had seen what God does to wicked cities. And now he looks at Zoar and thinks, what if this one is next? So he leaves. He takes his 2 daughters and goes up into the hills, the very place the angels originally told him to flee. The place where he said he couldn't reach. The place he bargained his way out of. Now he goes there anyway. Fear finally accomplishes what obedience couldn't. He settles in a cave. The man who once sat in the gate of a city now lives in a hole in the rock. The man who chose the well-watered valley now hides in the hills. The trajectory from prosperity to poverty is complete. Lot went from Abram's tent to Sodom's gate to a cave in the mountains. Each move seemed like progress at the time. Each move was actually descent. And in that cave, something terrible happens. The firstborn daughter speaks to the younger. Our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come in to us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father. Let's be clear about what's being proposed. The daughters believe, or claim to believe, that there are no other men left, that Sodom's destruction was global, that the fire that fell on the valley has ended humanity, that they are the last women alive. This is almost certainly not true. They passed through Zoar. They know other cities exist. But isolation does strange things to the mind. Trauma warps perception. And living in a cave with only your father, having lost your mother, your fiancés, your home, your entire world, maybe the lie felt true. Or maybe they knew exactly what they were doing, and the no men on earth was just justification. Either way, the plan proceeds. They get their father drunk. The firstborn goes into him first. He doesn't know when she lies down or when she rises. The next night, they do it again. The younger daughter, same method, same oblivion. Lot passed out from wine, father's children by both of his daughters. This is one of the darkest passages in Genesis. Incest, deception, exploitation of a man too drunk to consent, daughters using their father's body for their own purposes. The text doesn't moralize. It doesn't insert, this was evil in the sight of the Lord. It just reports. Flatly, clinically, here's what happened in the cave. The absence of commentary isn't approval. The Bible often lets the horror speak for itself. Where did this come from? How did Lot's daughters arrive at this plan? How did incest become thinkable, much less executable? The answer, I think, is Sodom. Remember what Lot offered to the mob outside his door? I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you please. Lot offered his virgin daughters to be gang raped by the men of Sodom. He was willing to sacrifice their bodies to protect his guests. What did that teach them? It taught them that bodies are currency, that their sexuality was a tool for survival, that desperate times justified desperate measures, that the end justified the means. Sodom formed them. Even though they escaped the fire, they didn't escape the formation. And where did Lot's drunkenness come from? This is a man who just lost everything, his city, his wife, his sons-in-law, his possessions, his status, his future. He's living in a cave with his 2 daughters, traumatized and displaced. Is it any wonder he drinks himself into oblivion? Noah, after the flood, planted a vineyard and got drunk. Lot, after the fire, does the same. Survivors sometimes drown their survival in wine. The daughters both conceive. The firstborn bears a son and names him Moab, which sounds like the Hebrew for "from my father." She's not hiding what happened. She's memorializing it. The younger bears a son and names him Ben-ammi, son of my people. Less explicit, but still a marker. These boys will become the fathers of nations, the Moabites and the Ammonites, Israel's neighbors, sometimes enemies, always complicated. Ruth will be a Moabite, the great-grandmother of David, the line that leads to Jesus. Even from this cave, this darkness, this sin, God will bring redemption. But that's later. For now, there's just a cave. What are we supposed to do with this passage? The Bible includes it for a reason. It's not gratuitous. It's not shock value. It's showing us something we need to see. First, sin's consequences extend beyond the sinner. Lot chose Sodom. Lot pitched his tent toward wickedness. Lot sat in the gate of a corrupt city, and his daughters grew up there. They learned Sodom's values. They absorbed Sodom's ethics. They internalized Sodom's view of sex, survival, and desperation. Lot escaped the fire, but he couldn't escape what Sodom had done to his family. The city burned, but its influence lived on in that cave. Your choices shape the people around you. Your compromises form your children. The Sodom you tolerate becomes the Sodom they inherit. Second, trauma doesn't excuse sin, but it explains it. These daughters aren't cartoon villains. They're shattered survivors. They've lost their mother, their fiancés, their home, their world. They're living in a cave with an alcoholic father who once offered them to a mob. None of that makes what they did right, but it makes it comprehensible. Hurt people hurt people. Broken people make broken choices. Understanding isn't the same as excusing, but compassion can coexist with condemnation. Third, the Bible doesn't sanitize its heroes. Lot is Abraham's nephew. He's rescued by angels. Peter will later call him righteous Lot. And yet here he is, drunk in a cave, fathering children by his daughters. Genesis refuses to airbrush. It shows us the patriarchs at their worst. It lets the darkness stand alongside the light. It trusts us to hold complexity. If you're looking for perfect people in the Bible, you won't find them. What you'll find is a God who works through profoundly broken vessels. Fourth, God brings redemption from ruin. Moab and Ammon shouldn't exist. They're the product of incest, deception, and desperation. They're born in a cave, conceived in sin, named as reminders of shame. And yet, Ruth the Moabite will say to Naomi, "Your people shall be my people, and your God my God." She'll marry Boaz. She'll bear Obed. Obed will father Jesse. Jesse will father David. The line that leads to Jesus passes through Moab. The cave's offspring ends up in the genealogy of the Messiah. This doesn't redeem the sin, but it shows that God can redeem from the sin. No origin is too dark for grace. Lot disappears from the narrative after this. We never hear from him again. No death notice, no burial, no final word. He just fades out, a man in a cave, a cautionary tale without an ending. He started with Abraham, hearing the call, walking toward the promise. He ended up alone in a hole, having lost everything, exploited by his own children. The arc of Lot's life is a warning. Proximity to the righteous isn't the same as being righteous. You can travel with Abraham and still end up in a cave. So here's what Genesis 19, 30 through 38 would have us savor today, as bitter as it might be. If you've made choices that shaped your children in ways you regret, if your compromises became their normal, this passage says the influence is real. What you tolerate, they inherit. But it also says redemption is possible. Ruth came from Moab. If you're dealing with trauma, if pain has warped your judgment, if survival has become an excuse for things you'd never normally do, this passage says you're not alone. But it also says trauma isn't a blank check. There's still right and wrong, even in caves. And if you're in a cave right now, isolated, ashamed, wondering how you got here, this passage says the story isn't over. Moab looked like an ending. It became a lineage. God writes futures from ruins. Lot fled Sodom. He lost his wife on the road. He hid in a cave in the hills. And there in the darkness, the story reached its lowest point. But even there, in that cave, God was not finished. He never is. Next time on Eat This Book, Abraham has seen angels, fire from heaven, and covenant promises. And then he tells the same old lie, again. Why do our deepest fears survive our greatest spiritual moments? Join me in Genesis 20 as the father of the faith fails twice, and God protects the promise anyway. Thanks for reading with me. Until next time, may the Word dwell in you richly.